Brace yourselves, boys and girls, because today on the Adotat Show, we're plunging into the ad tech cesspool with the unflappable David Kohl. He's danced with compliance demons, wrestled fraud monsters, and waded through quality quagmires, all while dodging the sleazy tentacles of MFA sites. From the PwC trenches to his throne at TrustX, David's cracked the code to surviving this madhouse. So, pour yourself a stiff drink, maybe two, because you're gonna need it, and get ready for a darkly hilarious romp through the underworld of advertising. Let's get messy.
Deserve to win when it matters most. Facing multi-billion-dollar bet the company litigation? No problem. That's why we're here. Troutman Amin, LLP is a true legal
Ladies
powerhouse.
and gentlemen, gather around and strap yourselves in because we got a special treat for you today on the Adotat Show. I'm your host, the one and only Pesach Lattin, and today we're about to pick the brain of a true advertising maverick, none other than David Kohl, the maestro marketing magic. So, how are you holding up, really? And please spare me the PR spin. I want the dirt.
You always get dirt when we talk. What dirt? Tell me the dirt you want and I'll give it to you.
Any real juicy details?
Well, look, there are two big stories going on in our industry right now. MFA, made for advertising. Big press earlier this week. I guess by the time the studio audience sees this, it'll be a few weeks out. But we saw analytics reframe everyone's efforts to reduce MFA and to start spending their money in premium publishers. That's big category one. And not a day goes by we don't see something on cookies, privacy, data protection, our friends at Google and others. So yeah, a lot of good stuff to talk about today with you, man.
All right, Fetsa, what questionable breakfast choice fueled your morning today? And don't say kale smoothie because I'm not in.
I'm in New York. We don't eat kale smoothies. You know, I alternate. I got like three standard go-tos. Well, cereal, which was this morning's. I like great grains. It gives me that sort of mix of health and good carbs. I do the really nice fresh oatmeal, and then once in a while I go for eggs and good cheese omelet. So today's was the great grains. So I'm on a great grains diet and a salad for lunch. How's that? Healthy day.
Sounds great. Good. So you've been around the media and advertising block a few times, seen things go from print ads to pixel, and watched the internet gobbled up by television's lunch money. With all this under your belt, how has your jaunt through the history of advertising shaped your grand vision for TrustX? I mean, was there a light bulb moment amidst the chaos, or did you wake up one day and decide to steer the ship through the storm of digital deceit?
Woo! I love the language. You know, sometime, I think it was probably about Jeff Zucker, he was then at the helm of NBC. He said, we're moving from analog dollars to digital pennies. And like a year later, I think he updated it to digital dimes, but it was still, the 10 to 1. And I think that may have been the very beginning of the TrustX journey for me. Because this is what I did. I had clients at PwC, you mentioned it, also was at EY after that, and my clients were seeing their analog dollars get eaten by digital pennies and dimes, for sure.
So looking back with 2020 hindsight, which is, I should say, is always a cheeky move, what were the seismic shifts in the industry that you saw coming when everyone else was blissfully ignorant?
That's not a fair question, because I think there are a lot of smart people in the industry, and I don't mean to, butter up my friends here, but I got a lot of people I'm around every day who see things that maybe aren't in the vernacular, maybe aren't what everybody's talking about, but there's a handful of really smart people in the industry. I think there are two things that maybe prompted me to get TrustX going, and another thing that we started looking at in 2015. The first thing on the transparency, accountability, like all the dark corners of digital, that was something that we were looking at probably back in 2013. Right. And programmatic was still relatively new. But already, again, my clients were premium. My clients were NBC. My clients were Disney. And they're going, this thing called programmatic, which is like a rocket ship in terms of adoption. It's all the things we later talked about. There's non-transparency going on. I think Bob Liadis once said it, where there's mystery, there's margin, right? And
right.
We were thinking that beforehand. So that was one of those things. The other thing is on this whole privacy and data protection. I have to say, with Apple's beginning the pulling of identity from the ecosystem, we were already thinking ahead with our publishers to what's this moment going to be where they're either in existential crisis or they actually create an opportunity for themselves. And we can get into those two things.
How did all your years of experience turn into a weapon against the trust and transparency crisis plaguing the programmatic world? So
when you're in consulting, your job is to have experience across a lot of different companies. You listen to what, and again, some of our clients, like, what is Disney? What is ABC television saying? What are my clients at NBC saying? By the way, also clients, Group IPG and what was then Media Brands, right? We're just listening. And when you start to hear multiple companies from different parts of the supply chain all say, this thing has got a problem. This thing isn't what it's cracked up to be. All that promise that automation is going to bring efficiency, automation is going to make it better one-to-one. Come on, it's all bullshit. Like we created an ecosystem that was designed to create profit in the middle, and we failed to remember that our job to get done was to enable brands to get to their consumer at the right place at the right time without having to go to thousands and thousands and thousands of publishers and create their own one-to-one deals.
Wait, so are you a superhero or a mad scientist?
I don't know. I'm just a guy. I'm kind of bald and maybe a little fat.
So what's the kraken lurking beneath the surface for publishers and advertisers? And you're not allowed to say budget cuts.
I think this changed with privacy, with deprecation of IDs. And I don't just say deprecation of cookies, because cookies is just one piece of the ecosystem. It's cookies, it's device IDs, it's eventually IP address. I think that is the biggest single both threat and opportunity to premium publishers. I think that we're at this moment where everything's in the balance, and if it tips one way, we see a very different outcome for premium than if it tips another way. I think this is the biggie.
So where's it going from here?
We have an opinion on this, and I talked to enough of my publishers that I think we're very well aligned with them. And so let me tell you what it is and then talk a little bit about what the buying side of the community thinks. I see that there are two things happening now in the world of data protection. You've got shared identity and you've got clean rooms. Shared identity serves a purpose. It's important that buyers and sellers have a way to connect audiences, a way to targeting for measurement, etc. Like we can all agree with that. But if you really think about it, shared identity kind of looks like a cookie, it smells like a cookie, it tastes like a cookie. It's kind of like we're just repeating the sins of the past. Right. And again, there's a purpose there, but I don't think we've implemented it right. I don't think we've executed on how to use a shared identity infrastructure. If our goal, again, our job to be done is to create a better privacy-safe future for our audiences and our customers and to protect data. So category one is shared identity. Category two are these things called clean rooms. And I think clean rooms are actually really powerful database technologies that allow one-to-one connectivity and collaboration without data going all across the bid stream. But the problem with the clean rooms is that they're big, they're complicated, they're expensive. They're great if you're NBC and your top 10 or 15 spenders. When you get to advertiser 21 through 10, they fall apart. And so our perspective is we've got to find a middle ground. We've been working on a middle ground. We've been working on this with our publishers for years now. We're close to getting something out the door on it. But my view is we've got this middle between IDs throwing around the bid stream and traditional clean rooms that are really complicated. That's what we got to end up with. And that'll benefit publishers and it'll benefit the advertisers who do business with them who want to keep their customer data safe.
So I want you to take out your tea leaves a little and give me a piece of sage advice that you give to anyone who needs to sail the turbulent waters. Is it more about the tech, the tactics, or just keeping cool head when everyone else is running to the lifeboats?
That's a really good question. I think it's probably a little bit of all of that. We have in our industry forever, not just now with ID deprecation, we wait to the last second. It's everybody does. I remember when GDPR came into effect in May of 2000, if I'm getting my date right, 17 or 18, whatever it was, in May, 25 days beforehand, people are like, we got GDPR coming. You guys have that data protection agreement that you floated by us 6 months ago? And I think the same thing was kind of happening. We didn't see anybody really freaking out until January when Google suddenly said, end the cookies. By the way, 1% on Chrome, but let's not forget that Apple's been offline now since, 20?
Right.
So it's not 1%, it's like 31% in the United States on just desktop and mobile browsers, and it's over 50% in the US on mobile. So there has to be urgency. We have to be freaking out a little bit. But at the same time, just jumping to the first thing that's thrown out in front of you is a terrible mistake. We do need to have that level head, and should we be using this? Should we be using that? And, we could all crap on Google Privacy Sandbox in early tests. Everybody's saying, oh, it's crazy, complicated, expensive. And I'm sure we'll iterate and we'll get a little better. But, I, for one, don't think that's necessarily the right solution. But we got to have a level head to evaluate it.
So may as well talk about cookies. We're definitely staring down the barrel of the cookie apocalypse, and the digital advertising world seems to be at a crossroads. With cookies crumbling faster than a cheap dessert in a toddler's hands, how do you see the era evolving? Is this the end of an era or a much-needed diet?
It's a super question, and it's a much-needed diet. We screwed up privacy. We completely blew. All of us, guys like me.
I'm hearing that from everyone that seems to have a good head on their shoulders, that we really effed up.
We totally did. We treated the consumer with no dignity and respect. We failed to provide an experience for content and advertising that wasn't creepy.
Right.
Look, I ask you, how many of your friends have figured, you know what's going on in advertising? Does your phones listen to you? Like, how many ask you that?
Oh, they ask me all sorts of questions. They think that their toaster is recording their sex habits. I mean, it's what everyone thinks. And then instead we got rid of the cookie, which is probably not that bad compared to some of the solutions.
So that's interesting you say that. So cookies are inherently not little pieces of serial numbers in your browsers. And by the way, as a consumer, if you understand what they are and how to deal with them, you can periodically delete them. A lot of the new gen IDs we see in the market are tied into email addresses. They're much more durable and they cross devices, and in theory, they're explicitly authorized by the consumer to be used for different purposes. Although I would argue that most people don't understand what they're saying yes to.
No.
But I view these new forms of identity that rely on an email address as far less private, much more permanent. You can't just delete your underlying email address and suddenly refresh or restrict who sees you online. So
what's the master plan now? I mean, we have to navigate these uncharted waters without the cookies. What's the master plan? Because frankly, relying on good old-fashioned guesswork feels a bit retro.
It's super retro. I wouldn't do it. So back to what I was saying, I think we have some value in these shared identity systems that require a consumer to more explicitly consent. I think that we cannot put the consumer back in a position where they have no idea what they're consenting to. So I have this narrow view of the use of identity, which is enable a first party, a company like an advertiser or a publisher, where the consumer, where the person, the everyday person, not the people in ad tech that understand this stuff, your mom and dad, my mom and dad, my sister, my brother, where they say, I'm currently, browsing the Washington Post, and I'm okay saying to the Washington Post, you can give me a relevant ad.
Right.
Don't put me in a position as a consumer to understand what it means when I say, and by the way, I'm going to send your ID across the bid stream, and thousands of companies are going to get access to it to build profiles about you so that I can deliver you a targeted ad. Very, very big difference. I think we got to stick with the first, not the second.
So, do you have any secret recipes for success in the post-cookie world?
I do have some secret recipes, but I'm not going to tell you all about them until we're ready to talk about them publicly. We're working on a piece of technology that I think I most describe as a real-time data clean room that's tuned for programmatic, and you'll hear all about it soon enough.
So moving on to privacy and ad effectiveness, it's definitely a tug of war. How do you propose we keep from tipping too far in either direction? I mean, as I used to say, how can we have our cookie and eat it too?
I knew you'd have some really good lines. I like them. I do think we need to carry forward by using some form of identity infrastructure that doesn't get shared across the bid stream, but identity infrastructure that enables an advertiser who understands its target audience, whether it's current customers or prospect lists or whatever they are. We need to provide the capability for advertisers to reach the people they want to reach across the open web. If we don't provide such a capability, if we become too restrictive, all those ad dollars will go to the big platforms like Meta and TikTok, to the extent it's still legal in this country, to Google, because those are the platforms with an almost infinite number of identifiable people, and those platforms track those people and provide insights that the advertisers can use for addressability. And then, by the way, they also have all the infrastructure for measurement within the platform. So we do need to have a future that does enable the deterministic precision of the advertiser-selected audience to be reachable and measurable across the open web. We need that. We just don't want to be doing it in the way that cookies used to work or that maids used to work, where you squeeze the data out of the toothpaste tube and you can't put it back in.
Right. Seriously, any sneak peeks you can give us into the Ad Tech Innovation Lab you care to share? So is TrustX donning a superhero cape, or is this more like a collective Avengers-style effort?
I think it's more collective. So let me step back on TrustX. It's really important that this be understood. Our mission when we started the company was to differentiate premium publishing companies from the rest of the open web, and frankly from the rest of the platforms as well. Premium in programmatic, premium is just lumped in with everything else. And we see that today in the debate over MFA. When you buy with your DSP, most of the programmatic infrastructure works by buying audience without too much of a care about the publisher. And so our mission with TrustX was to differentiate premium and provide an easy button for advertisers to reach premium in programmatic markets.
So you're not a fan of block lists, I assume.
No, not at all. I'm a fan of inclusion lists. I'm a fan of buyers selecting performant media and sticking with it. And if they need to expand it because there's more performant media out there, buy more performant media. And premium performs. So TrustX was created because we wanted to show buyers that when they buy premium, they get better outcomes. And we do that. We do that every day. We have clients who have seen the light and they love it. But we didn't create TrustX to create an SSP. We created TrustX for the mission of making it easier for advertisers to buy really high performing media. And so as we evolve, because the dialogue is evolving towards privacy and data protection, we'll keep doing what we're doing, but we're adding arrows to our quiver. We're adding more ways for advertisers to reach the audiences they want to reach in premium content environments. And how we do that, it's going to change.
So how do you see transparency between publishers, advertisers, and consumers evolving? Are we aiming for a kumbaya moment, or is this like navigating a minefield?
I want to talk about the consumers separately. The commercial relationship between advertiser and publisher has been disintermediated over the years by a lot of technology companies in the middle. And I think we've lost some of that value exchange that existed before programmatic. Advertisers saw a lot of value when they bought media in quality inventory, and the tech supply chain has in many ways disintermediated that. And I think, and it's not just TrustX, a lot of companies in our supply chain have actually realized that what their job to be done is, if you subscribe to that theory, and we are getting better at giving buyers good quality stuff. The conversation around MFA still have a distance to go, but it's all about getting buyers into a place where they're buying media that actually drives a benefit to them. From a consumer perspective, we got a little bit of a different dynamic because the consumer does see more relevant advertising with programmatic. But let's not forget that programmatic does a good job of putting the right ad in front of the right consumer most of the time. And I don't want to knock that. We should still have that because consumers say they prefer that. And by the way, they respond better to it. So I think we haven't totally failed the consumer in terms of quality. What we have is we've misused their data in order to get there. And that's the part that we need to change.
So do you have any pro tips for keeping everyone honest in the ecosystem without turning into a helicopter parent?
Wow, pro tips. I mean, some of it's kind of like we're just saying the same thing for the last 7 years, which is pay attention. Yeah, I'll tell you a story. I shall keep the advertiser nameless, but let's just say they're a big CPG brand. Back in so our first year in business, TrustX had the opportunity to get in front of a major CPG brand, and actually several of them, but in particular one, who said, hey, how do you guys charge for your service? And, we charge. We're sort of quasi nonprofit. We're own publishing community, but we still have to earn some money to keep the lights on. And at the time, because we're an SSP, we removed our fee from the supply chain, just like our friends at Magnite, Programmatic, et cetera, Google, all the rest. And this executive said to me, that's kind of a little bit non-transparent because if you charge in the supply chain, we as the advertiser, we're sort of paying for that. We don't necessarily know how much it is.
Of course.
If you really want to charge your publishers, you should bill them after the fact. You should let our media buy the media and then the publishers pay for your service. I said, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but let's give it a shot. And in a few months after wrangling some heads in the publisher community, we agreed to do it and we changed our billing model in the name of transparency, in the name of accountability. So that's like a way that we altered things. By the way, the end of the story is the executive from this CPG advertiser was super excited that we had done this, that we were going to be a leader in taking fees out of the supply chain. And then we talked to the head of media buying who said, until everybody comes along, it'd be like apples and oranges. You got to go back to the old way until the rest of the industry.
It'd be hard to build, probably.
Yeah, exactly. So we stuck with it. We stuck with our guns that we were going to be more transparent and we don't charge for media in the supply chain. We bill our publishers separately.
So just changing up a little bit, where'd you grow up and what's the backstory behind your hometown hero persona?
So I grew up in Long Island on North Shore in a town called Roslyn. I was a little bit of like an outsider.
You don't say Long Island, though.
Well, it's because I live in Westchester now, and after a little time being out of the Island, you get a new. I grew up in the island, in the Island. How's that? And
it makes me feel like I'm back home in New York.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. I didn't sort of eat up the whole Roslyn persona thing. It was a little bit of a tough place. A lot of high pressure, keep up with the Joneses. And I was glad to get out of the island and move to Westchester. We live in a community now called White Plains, far more diverse. Our kids went to public schools. We sort of felt like we wanted to be more the everyday kind of person. So getting out of the high pressure zone and putting my new family, my kids, into the lower pressure zone.
Okay, let's cut to the chase. What everyone wants to talk about. The digital ad world has been buzzing about kicking made-for-advertising sites to the curb like yesterday's news. But despite all the bravado, we're still watching ad dollars get sucked into a black hole of low-quality content. What is your take on this seamlessly Sisyphean task of cleaning house in the ad space? Is it a lot of hot air, or is there a real plan to vacuum up the mix?
So that sucking sound of ad dollars being pulled out of the premium ecosystem and into this vast...
That's why I feel like it is. It's just sucking it.
It's really a problem. It's a problem, in my view, for two big reasons. The first is that the advertisers they're not just wasting money. There's actually research that says that consumers who see brands in these horrific clickbaits blame the advertiser for supporting them. And I think IAS did a study I'll forget the numbers, but let's just say it's in the 60 to 70% of consumers said that they actually would stop buying a product from an advertiser they saw on one of these awful clickbait sites.
So most of us don't want to go to those sites. Most of us, and that's the other part, is they're not just clickbait. A lot of them are just completely, not just fake news, but the ads themselves are completely deceptive.
It's misleading headlines that, I see them all the time, like how to grow hair. I'm like, woo, I'm there.
Well, but for me, it's like all those cool cars. So this is the new Audi, this is the new Ford. I'm like, man, this is a beautiful car. And you click on it, and then after 5 clicks later, it's the same Audi before. It's just they used a fake photo. So so none of the hair growth stuff has worked.
None of the hair growth stuff has worked. And by the way, I'm a private pilot. I fly airplanes. I'm extremely interested in content about flying, about airplane safety, and I have had the same experience. Maybe because they know who I am, the targeting engine, they're really good at putting clickbait for airplanes that looks like it's real legit stuff, and then I'm sucked down the MFA vortex like you.
So TrustX somehow has managed to emerge as a shiny beacon. You joined the ranks of the Ozone Project and Cargo. What's the secret sauce? Did you all just decide to be grown-ups in the room, or was there actually some sort of digital sorcery?
So first off, love Harry Cargman. Cargo's a great company. They've got this really premium rich media unit. And so for guys like Cargo, I'm sure what he would tell you is we choose our clients. So that's kind of that makes sense. And our friends at Ozone in the UK, I think they got about 7 or 8 news publishers, maybe a few others. It's UK centric, same kind of thing. They're a consortium of high quality brands. That's all they service. And for us at Trust, we're scaled across 5 news, sports, and entertainment domains. And every single domain ladders up to a company where we get to know the corporate entity. We look at their content creation and distribution requirements. We make sure that they take responsibility for their content, and we choose carefully. We're kind of preaching, we're doing in our own company what we're preaching to others, which is start with inclusion. You don't throw the net wide and then exclude. We start small and we expand as we see other opportunities to bring premium publishing into our environment. It's not that hard.
Right. I think that everyone says it's like finding a needle in a haystack, and yet here you are, needle in hand. So obviously something can be done.
So look, I want to, with all due respect, talk about the long tail of non-MFA, right? So there's super premium, which is us, and we are doing our best to keep that shape shifting a little bit, but stay in that kind of very high-end premium. Then there's the garbage on the low end that we can all agree looks like MFA, smells like MFA, tastes like MFA, must be MFA. Sounds like a cookie. And there's the middle. And the middle it's under stress because some of that middle relies on some of the practices that the MFA guys rely on. So some of the middle relies on referred traffic, but they're still legitimate, real publishers who didn't publish to game the advertising ecosystem, but published to create value to consumers. And so those are the kind of more difficult ones. And there are publishers that probably have a few too many ads on the page. but they're not thousands of ads on a page.
Right.
And so it's that middle group that's complicated. And my view on it, and I'm coming from the premium side, so I could say this, but my view on it is if you're a brand and you're trying to keep yourself out of the horrible, horrible stuff, you start with an inclusion list. You start with an inclusion list of quality publishers that, not only that your reports, that your past experience says works for you. Because every advertiser should have a sense of what publishers are driving value for them. If they don't, you're asleep at the switch, or your agency's asleep at the switch. I guarantee you, quality brands know what works for them. Start with that inclusion list. And if by accident you left out, I don't know, some smaller, longer tail publisher, and they come to you and knock on your door and say, hey guys, I'd really like you to be in our publishing environment, add them.
Right.
Don't outsource MFA to IAS and DV. Don't outsource it. Look, I love Chris Kane and Jobs Media. These are starting points. Deep Sea, Jobs Media, they help you create your first iteration of your inclusion list. But don't be asleep at the switch. Don't be like, I outsource it to somebody else, and then whatever they say goes. That's not a sustainable approach for quality long-tail media, and it's also probably not good for you as an advertiser to restrict yourselves just to somebody else's list. You should know where your ads perform.
So we have people that are actually claiming MFA sites are akin to fine dining. Do any advertisers truly belly up to this buffet by choice, or are they just getting served day-old bread and calling it a gourmet meal? Let's be real here. When was the last time someone said, yes, please, I'd love my brand to be sandwiched between 10 ways to lose belly fat, and you won't believe what this child star looks like now?
There is zero possibility that an advertiser will truly get value from MFA. There are ways that MFA can game the system with attribution pixels. It's like fraud. When we were all talking about bot fraud, when that was the headline 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, people were like, but some fraud works. Fraud does not work. Fraud is not a person. Fraud cannot be your product. So MFA is the same thing. MFA is an environment that is horrifically negative for any brand that shows up there. And if you happen to believe that you're getting value from it, it's because the MFA publisher has gamed the attribution system to look like they're delivering you a return on investment. It's not real.
So why are we still in this wrestling with the hydra of MFA sites? I understand some people, yourself, are rallying around the flag of good guy lists. But is this just plain whack-a-mole with a feather duster?
It's Luke Descalis. Last summer, we were on stage at Cannes. We had this event on the beach. And we're looking out over the sand. We're talking about MFA. And Lou points to the sand and he goes, it's like counting the grains of sand on this beach. You can't possibly count them all. So don't try. MFA is the same. As quickly as you think you've excluded something, a new one pops up. As quickly as you've got a filter, someone else is passing the filter. And by the way, as quickly as we create a standard, the MFAs will game that standard. So I'm a super simple guy. Start with an inclusion list. Quality inventory sellers. You know who they are. You can probably get between 50 and 100 sellers on a list, and you'll cover every potential person in the United States, globally, wherever your targets are, and you don't need to nurse the MFA. And if you accidentally forgot somebody, add them later. That's okay. You can change your list over time.
So let's look for the future. Is there a promised land where ads live in harmony with content that doesn't make our eyes roll back into our skulls?
So I actually think this change in audience identity helps us get closer to that. I think that let's imagine a future where in order to identify somebody online, they need to actually give permission to do so. What that means is that companies that produce content that has a value enough to a consumer to give them permission will be the ones that are supported by ads. Unfortunately, some companies won't make it through that, but it forces the quality in our industry to increase, which I think is a good thing overall. So fewer total places to go across the web, but each one of them is a little better. And I think the ad experience, therefore, will also be a little better because the ability for the advertiser or publisher to do business together, probably through programmatic, will be more explicit, more deterministic and clearer. And we probably won't need we won't need sites with hundreds of ads on a page. What we'll need is fewer sites with fewer ads that actually create a better experience for the audience.
Changing topics a little bit, in the whirlwind of ad tech, where innovation is the name of the game and goalposts are always moving, how do you plant your flag and cultivate a culture that's not just about chasing the next big thing, but also doing it with integrity? Is it about being the smartest kid in the room, or is there more to the leadership equation?
So I have like a business hero His name is Simon Sinek, if y'all know what he is. Simon, I think he made his debut probably early 2000s at a TED Talk, and he introduced this principle he calls the golden circle. And the middle of the circle is the word why, UHY. Start with why. What's your mission? Why are you doing what you're doing? And so, you talk about this culture of chasing the new shiny object. Chasing the shiny object happens because you don't necessarily focus on sustaining, or I should say, fulfilling a mission that you set out to fulfill. So, we have to constantly innovate. The product we're working on now on privacy and data protection is an example of that innovation. But our grounding, our starting point, comes from my business book hero, Simon Sinek, which was we figured out what's our why, what's our purpose, what's our mission, and we're just staying laser focused on that mission. And so, when the conversation in the industry changes, we have to evaluate, is that conversation changing, and do we need to make a change ourselves? And the answer is, well, how would we do so while staying true to our mission? So that's how I manage it. And I will say we do chase, let's not say we're not innovating. We are innovating. But we're innovating on mission. And if it's not on mission, I let it go.
So besides don't panic and always know where your towel is, are there any hard-learned lessons that you've picked up on the battlefield of ad tech that you'd pass to the next generation of leaders?
Totally. I made an assumption when we started TrustX that if we perform, our publishers will all cancel other SSP contracts and we'll be it. And our entire business plan was based on this idea that within a few years we would be with a capital T, premium publisher SSP. I was way wrong there. Not because we didn't perform and not because we don't deliver real value for our publishing partners and our advertising partners. It's because I learned that there's actually a benefit, a marketplace benefit for having a degree of competition. I personally think we've gone too far. I know some publishers that have 10, 15 SSPs attached to their pre-bid setup. I think that's way over. 3 to 5 is probably a sweet spot where there's a level of coverage and the interface across multiple DSPs makes the yield that comes across the publishers actually work for them. And so that's a micro story for the question you asked, which is what would I teach my future self? I think I teach my future self that there's always more to learn and more to appreciate, and that any assumption you make is going to ultimately have the opportunity to either be real or proven wrong, and it's likely to be the latter.
So how do you keep your ethical compass pointing north?
It's not always easy, I will admit. When things get rough, when the business is seeing a down month, you're always wondering, well, should we maybe pull another publisher in that was previously off our list? Or, should we try to cut a volume deal somewhere that gets us a little more juice in return for something later? And I would say that we've thought about it a few times, but we've ultimately landed on, no, we've got to keep peace with what we set out to do. It's hard, though. I struggle with it sometimes. Thankfully, we're doing pretty well right now, so, we can keep our heads straight down the arrow.
As everyone knows, everything's changing. AI, privacy regulations tightening. Do you have a blueprint for leading ag tech teams through these choppy waters? Is it about embracing the chaos, or do you have a secret map?
I've got to come back to what I said about mission. I got a team of people who work for TrustX now that are dedicated to why we're doing what we're doing. The fact that it's an SSP, the fact that it's a privacy-enhancing technology platform, the fact that we're solving problems for advertisers, publishers, and consumers, what we do and what technology and how we execute it is less important to the team than why we're doing it. And it keeps everybody focused, aligned, and excited. That's how I manage. That's how we manage the company. It's how we keep people that work for us doing what they're doing every day.
So when life has you on the ropes, what's your go-to drink to knock yourself out? And bonus points if it has some peasant umbrella.
It does not have an umbrella. My wife is the mixologist in the family. I just like a really good red wine. I have a range of reds that I go to, but when it really needs the calming, open a bottle, let it decant. That's my go-to.
French, Italian?
I've been really into French wines. I do like Willamette Valley Pinot Noirs. We visited vineyards a couple of years ago and have been part of some wine clubs now there. I do Amarone. If you like an Amarone, good Italian Amarone, that's love that.
So if you could have a bottle of wine, what would it be, and why would it be the Chateau Margaux 1980?
First of all, I went to a wine tasting before COVID. A friend of mine was running a wine store, and he had this super high-end wine tasting. Like the minimum price on a bottle was probably $200. And my wife went, and I would tell you, I did not like any wine enough that even if it had been a $20 bottle of wine, I wouldn't have taken it home. Every wine, I was like, okay, I'm out. I'm just not that sophisticated. A couple months later, he had kind of the bourgeoisie wine tasting for the everyman. Wine bottles were like in the $20s and $30 range. I went home with So, I'm a very middle of the road guy. I'm nothing fancy. Just enjoy and don't get too pretentious about it.
If you could choose one meal to be your lifelong gastronomic partner in crime, what sinful night would it be? And again, we do not allow kale here unless it's drenched in cheese.
So first off, that is my ultimate nightmare. I'm a big foodie. I love food, but I hate repetition. Like, I don't even want leftovers in the same week. So
Really?
yeah,
One of my kids is the same way. He's always complaining about leftovers. He's like,
Yeah.
"Why are we eating leftovers?" I'm like, "Because that's what we do."
I love food. I love to try new things all the time. Even within the same region, the same cuisine, I want to try something different. So like, if I was on a desert island with one food, I don't know, I'd cry all day long. Now, if I was on the desert island with a James Beard chef, that would be different. I could deal with that.
Yeah. So is your dream job like working for Michelin?
I think when I retire, I might want to go to sommelier school and like really learn. Because like I know wines and I'm into them and like, oh yeah, I know Pinot goes with that. I know a Sauvignon Blanc goes with that, blah, 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 right? But like, and I don't, maybe some regions, but I don't know like vineyards and I don't know the years and and I enjoy it. Like when I get it right, I had this idea years ago for an app called VinTwin. It was your twinning of wine and food. And I had this whole business plan around it. I never did it, but it was all because I wanted to enhance that enjoyment of the food and wine pairing. And so I think when I retire, I might go to sommelier school and learn that stuff.
Yeah, I represented Zagat for a while, and I have to admit, I put their logo on my card. It said representing Zagat. It got me in all the restaurants. It was great.
That's great. They're gone. They were bought by Google?
Yeah, Tim and what's his wife's name? I forgot his wife's name. It's on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, they made a bunch of money and left.
Yeah.
So before we go, I'd like to ask if you could send yourself, and you kind of answered this anyways, but we'll do it again. If you could send yourself a time-traveling text message to the past when you first started in the industry, what would you tell yourself? And most importantly, would you listen to yourself?
I'm going to answer that question a little differently than you asked it because I think it's really important. I work really, really hard. I think anyone who runs a small company, particularly one that's now launching another major pivot in our lives.
Right. I can't wait to hear.
Yeah. Me too.
You don't know what's going on?
No, I just want to hear all about it publicly. You work really, really hard. And my kids are adult now. My daughter lives abroad. My son's in his last 2 years of college. But when I was younger, I also worked really, really hard. And I think I missed too much. I probably wasn't one of those consulting road warriors who was never home. I did a better job than most of my colleagues, but I did a worse job than most of my friends. And I kind of look back. So if I could have sent myself a text message before I had an iPhone, maybe when it was still a flip phone, and said, get home more. Don't miss the gymnastics recital. Be there for your kid. I would hope I'd listen to that more, even if it slowed me down in my career a little bit. And I think too many young people are like, they're just slamming the pavement every day and forgetting that they have lives, they have wives or husbands and families and kids, and they blow it. And by the way, when your kids are 23 and 26, you can't bring them back to middle school. They're gone already.
No. My eldest is going to Harvard Medical School next year, and she barely talks to me because same thing as you said. I wasn't really there when I was working.
Like I said, I did better than many of my colleagues in consulting, but I did worse than almost all my friends. And so that would be my text message to myself is get home and get home now.
And that's a wrap on today's deep dive into the murky waters of ad tech with the indomitable David Kohl. From compliance chaos to the fraud jungle and the MFA minefield, we've covered it all. Huge thanks to David for sharing his insights and some much-needed laughs. We also want to give a big shout-out to our sponsor, Troutman Ammon, the law firm that's got your back in this crazy industry. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Remember to hit subscribe, leave us a review, and keep your eyes peeled for the next episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and know more than you did yesterday.